Gorgeous, how are you doing? Welcome to Nanya Sim. If this is your first time of coming across this channel, sweetheart, kindly smash that subscribe button, turn your notifications so you are notified each time I upload, and please give this video a thumb up. I appreciate you all so much, and I am saying massive shout out to every one of you for all the love and support you all shower me here with. I am grateful, and you all are super sweet. This is a very long video, let me start with, but then let's get into this video. Actually, a black woman was asking what happened, what did black people do to Asians that make Asians, like, you know, hate black people so much, like the anti-blackness in their community is way too much. And man, there are so many stitches to this video. A lot of them explain that some of them actually never had any encounter with black people, but because of the white supremacist propaganda that they sold to them, that black people this, black people that, what the media is also projecting, right? All of them, most of them became anti-black, and they do not want to do anything with black. They also want to act white because they feel that, you know, their skin is more superior to black people's own. And then white people also see them as us because they are both all minorities. And you know what? I also find out that during like the time most of them migrated and the rest of it, some of them were like, wait, we are very hardworking. We are also part, like, you know, we also are very close to your skin color and all that, like we deserve to hold some of the powers that you, and they said no, you cannot hold the same power. We are the superior race and you all are still the minority groups and the rest of it, right? I mean, this video really, like, you know, opened my mind to so many things. Why this anti-blackness that is going on in black community, most of the things they say that, like, you know, behind closed doors where black people are not, like how racist is most of them towards black people, and some of them even pass this to their own children, you know, and telling them you don't have to mix with them because they feel like, you know, when they are close to white people, like, you know, they also get the power like white people have and all that. But it doesn't work like that. And the number one is that this propaganda they sell and the media pushes out about black people, and the white supremacy propaganda that, like, they sold to them, like, you know, you have to be this to black people and the rest of it. And some of them are acting out of ignorance. And I am just going to roll this clip. We'll come back to talk about it. I also want to read all your comments. Let me know what you all think in the comments section. So let's get into this video.
Hey y'all, what's up? I got a question, and I hope I end up on the wrong side of TikTok. I mean, I guess not really the wrong side, but a different side that's gonna give me the right answer. Asian Americans, why y'all don't like us for real? And no, it's not all of y'all, but it's a lot. You know, when they killed affirmative action, it was white Americans and Asian Americans on these apps celebrating and also complaining because they felt like there were too many African Americans getting into these Ivy League schools based off affirmative action, when the majority minorities on these campuses be Asian and Asian Americans. Come on now, let's not play. And then I just saw this video where the American Alliance for Equality, that is anti-affirmative action, make it make sense, which is composed of white Americans and Asian Americans, is now actively trying to sue private companies that support, like, black women in particular, which I find especially interesting, seeing as conservatives have historically fought for private companies to do what they want to do without government intervention or anybody telling them what to do with their money. And I could answer my own question with an analysis of the model minority complex and history tracking the relationships between Asian Americans and African Americans on the American history side. But I want to know, like, what goes on behind closed doors. Like, what did they tell y'all about us for y'all to dislike us so bad? We really be rocking with y'all, you know, complimenting you on your outfits, giving you props for your dance moves. I don't know, make sure the lights stay on at your mom and daddy laundromat, Chinese food shop, nail salon, if that's what your family on. I'm not saying that's all Asian people do, so don't get it twisted. I'm being for real. It's just a simple fact that they wouldn't let Asian Americans get business loans or properties in white neighborhoods, and will only let y'all get business loans and properties in black neighborhoods, so we're y'all only patrons. So yes, I'd be grateful if an Asian or Asian American could stitch this and tell us what they be telling y'all at home that make y'all not like us so bad. Thanks. This and tell us what they be telling y'all at home that make y'all not like us so bad.
So you already know a lot of what my content covers, like racial triangulation, the model minority myth, Asian businesses in black neighborhoods, affirmative action, and so on. As for what I was told in the home behind closed doors when I was growing up, that's not the most fun trip down memory lane, but I always like to be honest about acknowledging anti-blackness among Asian Americans, especially when the call is coming from my own house, so here we go. I first became aware of my mom's anti-Blackness when I started kindergarten, and it mostly centered around avoiding interactions with Black people and not allowing me to be exposed to anything that she considered Black culture. So if we were walking and she saw a Black person, she would pull me closer to her. If we were in the car in a parking lot and saw a Black person in the parking lot, she would make a point to lock the doors, and I wasn't allowed to listen to rap or Michael Jackson or Tina Turner. And she was hypocritical about that, because I wasn't allowed to listen to Cyndi Lauper or Madonna either. She would call it trash music and say that it was going to be a bad influence. But if it was a white artist, it was not racialized. It was only when it was Black artists that it was racialized. And another thing that I think is kind of typical is, as a musician, there were a lot of Black artists whom she respected and enjoyed, but she would always say that one Black artist is the exception, the rest are bad influences. When I went to school, if I came home and said I made a friend, her first question would be white or Black. And that drove me nuts, because in preschool, I dealt with a lot of bullying and discrimination because of being Asian, so it didn't make sense to me that she wanted me to turn around and do that very same thing to my Black classmates, whom she knew nothing about, on the basis of their skin color. And when I wouldn't stay away from my Black friends, she would resort to making up justifications as to why it was harmful for me. She would say they're going to hurt me and they're going to be a bad influence because they fight and they swear and they're not good students. And of course, none of that was true. And in my household, it was not physically or emotionally safe to voice your opinions, but about that I would, because it literally angered me. And then she would resort to physical violence. And that sealed the deal in my mind that prejudice is purely irrational, because none of her claims had any basis in reality, and that's why she had to resort to physical force. Unfortunately, I think that when parents resort to intimidation and violence to instill prejudice in their children, a lot of times it works. But I was very lucky, because the principal of my elementary school was a Black woman who implemented a program called Students Educating Each Other About Discrimination. And that wasn't centered on racial discrimination, it was about discrimination in general. But in that program, we learned to have discussions about discrimination and to identify it and disrupt it. Which at that age just means if you witness discrimination, say it's discrimination and articulate how you know that it's discrimination. So from learning that very powerful tool at school, I was able to identify that what my mom was doing at home was wrong. Additionally, the principal was a Black woman, so I had a Black woman in a position of leadership as a role model. And in my school district, she wasn't a token. They really valued Black leadership, from teachers to administration, guidance counselors, all the way up to superintendents. And so I was surrounded by Black role models who made me see that reality did not line up with what my mom was trying to teach me. The straw that broke the camel's back was sometime around the ages of between 7 and 9. I was planning a birthday party, and I told my mom that I want to invite my friend Keisha, which I knew was going to be an issue, but I thought I would try. And she said no, and I said, fine, then I don't want to have a birthday party, and she made me have the birthday party. So now that felt like that's not only cruel to me, but that's cruel to my friend Keisha, whom you don't even know because you refused to meet her. Shortly after that, we were walking in the mall, and my mom did this thing that she often did, which is she sees Black people minding their own business, and under her breath, she mumbles a derogatory term in Chinese for Black people. And I remember I pulled back on her hand and faced her, and I said, they are not doing anything. You don't know them. The next time you do that, I am going to go up to them, and I'm going to tell them what you said. And believe it or not, the fear of exposure by me actually made her tone it down, and she stopped doing that in public. Fortunately, my mom did not live and die that way. In later years, she came around to seeing and later openly admitting how wrong she was. In her older age, one of her best friends really was Black, and my mom admitted to her friend what her previous attitudes had been and why. And from those conversations, I was able to gain some insight as to what my mom's motivation was for her anti-Blackness. Because I think most people feel, since Asian Americans also are harmed by white supremacy, how does it make any sense for Asian Americans to be anti-Black? My mom spent most of her young life in Hong Kong when it was under British occupation, and then in the 1950s, she came to the United States when she was 16 years old. Generations before my mom, her family had been living in and doing business around Shanghai, Hong Kong, and Macau, which were French, British, and Portuguese occupied areas. So she was heavily indoctrinated into anti-Blackness in Hong Kong, where she had no exposure to Black people that would have shown her a different reality. And furthermore, what she was indoctrinated into is the idea that an Asian can elevate their status in white spaces by aligning with white supremacy, which includes aligning with anti-Blackness. So I think what my mom was doing with me is that from a young age, she saw that I was having a hard time as an Asian American assimilating. So she felt that if I associated with Black classmates, that would make assimilating into white spaces even harder. And she was concerned that associating with Black classmates would negatively impact my status in white spaces. Well, we all know with me that the outcome was I understand very clearly what spaces I want to be part of and what spaces I don't. So my mom was really proud that she was westernized. She was proud that she spoke English without an accent, that she was very well versed in European culture, and she actually looked down upon my dad for being what she called traditional and therefore backwards. Right, so where was my dad in all of this? My dad grew up in Taiwan, where he had no exposure to Black people, but he also had very little exposure to Western media. I think when he came to the United States, he was a bit uncertain around Black people because of the lack of familiarity and the slight media bias, but it only took a very little being around Black people to see that prejudice is irrational and that it serves a white supremacist agenda that he doesn't want to uphold. As I said before, in my household, it wasn't physically or emotionally safe to voice opinions that differed from my mom, so I do understand why my dad didn't speak up when my mom was being anti-Black. He had a hard enough time keeping my brother and I safe. However, what he would do is, when it was just my dad and I, he would make sure to teach me or give me resources about accurate Black history. So, for example, a lot of my mom's rhetoric surrounded musicians. So my dad would teach me about Berry Gordy, Chuck Berry, Marian Anderson, Jesse Norman. If the claim was that Black people don't value education, he would tell me about Black scholars, academics, and scientists, and so on. So that, in a nutshell, is what I was told at home behind closed doors when I was growing up.
Asian Americans, why y'all don't like us for real?
All right, important question, so I'm going to try to answer it. But not in the way you might think. Because what I'm not going to do is try to answer or justify away anti-Blackness that does exist in the Asian American community. And with what I'm about to say next, I'm not trying to be like, well, but what about you guys? I do want to gently push back against the comment that the Black community rocks with the Asian American community. Because if we're keeping it a buck, the animosity doesn't just go in one direction, it goes both ways. And that's what I want to address. And the way I'm going to do that is by giving context on my community. The Asian American community is made up of people from dozens of different countries that speak dozens of different languages, have different religious beliefs, and believe it or not, the hatred that exists within our community against one another is much stronger. And why is that? Well, maybe because we've been at war with each other for hundreds, if not thousands of years. Now, here's some more context. The majority of our community is first or 1.5 generation immigrants. Why is that important? That means that English is not their first language. American culture is not what they understand, nor do they have a strong grasp or understanding of American history. Now, for many of us who were born here and grew up here, we know about systemic racism. We have seen and experienced firsthand how harmful racism is. And we're taught about the civil rights movement. Granted, it was a whitewashed version, and I didn't actually learn about Malcolm X, Stokely Carmichael, Yuri Kochiyama, Grace Lee Boggs until I actively sought out that information myself. But that being said, I want to talk about Yuri Kochiyama. A lot of people don't know how close Malcolm X and Yuri Kochiyama were. In fact, in Spike Lee's adaptation of Malcolm X's life, he actually excludes the fact that Malcolm died in Yuri Kochiyama's arms. What's also not taught is the murder of Vincent Chin, and how his story doesn't become a national story if Reverend Jesse Jackson doesn't fly up to Detroit and demand that it becomes a national story. But people also don't know about leaders like Kathy Masayoka, who has been going to Congress year after year to testify using the reparations given to Japanese Americans after internment as justification for why the Black community and Black people deserve reparations too. So how do we fix this? I strongly believe that a lot of this is miscommunication, at least misunderstanding, and that has caused a lot of the pain that exists within our communities. So having dialogue like this, building real relationships in real life, coming together and partnering and actively working to understand one another better, sharing resources and opportunities, showing up for one another, and welcoming one another into our homes. Look, I'm not here to deny that individual Asian Americans have caused a lot of harm towards the Black community. Nor am I going to blame the entire Black community for the harm that individuals that are in the Black community have caused towards the Asian American community. But what I am calling for is for us to actively seek to understand each other and work together. Because together we are so powerful, and there's so much love that already exists. I hope this helps.
Asian Americans, why y'all don't like us for real? And no, it's not all of y'all.
I have the answer. This is like the second time of me like interfering in Asian spaces when talking about Asian Americans, but I don't know, it's funny. But I do have an answer to this because I have written 2 papers in relations to this, and I just finished my Asian Studies minor where we do talk about the intersectionalities of other Asian American people and the Black community. So let me answer it a little bit. And before you ask me of what I'm doing, I just did this entire dough of chocolate chip cookies. I have nothing else to do, so might as well do that. And to keep it brief and to keep it simple, before the whole like issue with the model minority myth, before the whole issue of affirmative action, before the LA riots even happened, I'm just going to give you a brief background of what it was like being Asian American within America in the most unbiased, nonpartisan way. And if other Asian Americans want to go ahead and bring more depth into this, I encourage it. But simply put, they were not technically illegal aliens, but they weren't technically citizens either. As in, they were trying to immigrate into the United States, and the first people that were doing it were Chinese Americans. But because there were such bills such as the Chinese Exclusion Act, where they could not have citizenship in the slightest, that's where things got a lot harder. In fact, a bill that I had to learn within my law and politics class was Ozawa versus the United States, in which a Japanese American was a citizen within the United States for 20 years. However, because the census, or at the very least, how to classify American citizens did not include Asian Americans, and Ozawa was like, hey, I'm not Black, but I'm also closer to white skin, so therefore I should have citizenship. But the United States was like, no, you're not, but we're not going to do anything about it, so there you go. And many other civil rights violations, including the lynching of Chinese Americans, yes, that happened, the Japanese internment camps, yes, that also happened, as well as other, I wouldn't say minor, but very isolated cases, such as the murder of Vincent Chin and the gentrification of the International Hotel in San Francisco, where a lot of Filipino Americans were stationed in, well, not stationed, but living in. However, because San Francisco was becoming more white, they were basically being displaced, as well as the colonization of the Philippines, but that's a whole other different story. But to answer your question, why do Asian Americans have such an anti-Black sentiment towards Black Americans, or just Black people in general? Are you going to believe in what I'm going to say here? I hope you are. Because we would like to pit our heads towards the model minority myth, in which Asian Americans were pretty much propagandized to say that, like, even though the US basically just pushed them down and kicked them at their absolute lowest, they are still better than African Americans, because you know what? You survived all of that. You worked hard on that, and you built a community and did all of this stuff in building the economy, even though we burnt down your towns as well as indirect white supremacy via colorism. As if you are familiar with Asian history, not just Asian American history, but Asian diaspora history, you would know that white skin equals nobility and dark skin equals you were the working class, you were in the fields. That's two of the main reasons. But another thing that a lot of people do not take notion to is the issue with identity versus proximity. Like I said, Asian Americans did not know where they belonged when it came to being white or being colored. They were just in this weird gray area. However, they wanted to get ahead in life. Asian Americans wanted to get ahead in life as much as white people were. So they were just like, look, I'm nearly the same color as you. I basically worked hard. I've done more than like African Americans will ever do. So therefore, I should be considered white. And that sentiment has been basically warped around, but still stayed the same to this day. So it's respectability politics via proximity. So long as you think like the white man, you are technically on the same level as the white man. Even though that's not entirely true, and the history shows that. And we're all familiar with the LA riots that happened within 1992, in which Latasha Harlins was killed by a Korean shop owner, Soon Ja-do, where she was basically acquitted of all crimes. And it basically just burned the entire city down. And it wasn't just something that just happened out of nowhere. There was already racial tension between both Black Americans and just Korean Americans, if we're going to keep it at a narrow deficit. Because even though Black Americans and Korean Americans were locked in like that because, you know, racial redlining, Korean shop owners as well as beauty supply owners that were Korean owned were still very prejudiced towards Black Americans, even though where else could they go? Keep in mind, this was during the stop and frisk epidemic that was happening in Los Angeles, you know, where police were dubiously searching Black people for anything nefarious. Yet those shop owners took very, very diligent advantage of that. Now, questions of cultural appropriation as well as just like using hip hop or Black culture within Asian American spaces, that is a case-by-case basis. I did do the research on that, but it is just a long and treacherous process of describing it. That is not enough for like 10 minutes. But the main reason as to why Asian Americans do not like Black people is because of white supremacist propaganda, but also the fact that they don't even know their own history when it came to solidarity with Black Americans. Matter of fact, either one of us don't know how much and how long of a solidarity that those two communities had within each other within Civil Rights America and beyond. And that's the issue, because white people don't want you to know that. I didn't learn about Vincent Chin's murder until like last semester. And even during the Asian hate crimes that were going on, that's where a lot of the history of solidarity came to fruition. And that is something that America does not want you to know. Especially with the recent book bannings that are going on within the country, the issues when it comes to intersectionality and wanting to connect within each other within multiracial communities, that is a big threat. Because once white supremacy is threatened by the alliance of other racial marginalized minorities, then it's a wrap. It is why Florida is upholding Asian American history while also banning African American history, because they want to continue that propaganda. It is why affirmative action was such an important issue within both the Black community and the Asian community because of said propaganda. Again, if other Asian Americans or other people within the Asian diaspora want to jump in, I highly encourage that, but this is just to kind of answer the question. The reason why Asian Americans don't like Black people is because of white propaganda, as it usually is.
The fact that they wouldn't let Asian Americans get business loans or properties in white neighborhoods and will only let y'all get business.
Okay, so I think a good lock and key to understand what's going on here is how anti-Semitism was created in feudal Europe. So basically, the ghetto was created for anti-Semitism, and not by like the H-man. It was created during feudalism, early capitalism. It was a part of town where Jewish people couldn't live. The majority of Jewish people were poor. They weren't allowed to have jobs in the traditional guilds, and they also, like, because they were fleeing the countryside where they were met with pogroms, like ethnic cleansing of Jewish villages, they were stuck in this ghetto. Now, the few people that got out of the ghetto, or were allowed to get out of the ghetto, are people that turned against their own class, turned against the other poor people around them, and then started making money off of those people's misery by collecting debts and buying off the property that they had to sell so that they can buy bread instead of their coat, and all that. And so, like, early capitalism, the ruling classes in Europe, the feudal lords that transitioned into like the richest, earliest like monopolist capitalist families, and yes, like they're a lot of the same families. They needed to blame Jewish people. So now we're coming back to like America with like Asian Americans only being allowed to own stores in black neighborhoods. Well, like obviously there's going to be a class antagonism between shopkeepers and working class people or declassed people that have been thrown out of their jobs because of deindustrialization, which itself is a consequence of imperialism from World War II in the USSR, and like the US using quote unquote cheap labor abroad, which means that like they had a hand in ensuring that there are not enough labor rights or like a good enough standard of living that we have here. And so when like they moved out all the factories, moved out all the jobs, black people who had predominantly been the working class in the US, like the factory workers, thrown out of work, mass incarceration complex starts up, and then the propaganda about the mass incarceration complex starts up, about like this image of black people as this like monolithic like thug thing, and like the whole like Reagan like super predator and all that. And so you're a shopkeeper, you're up above that class, and then you're taught that black people are in this situation by individual choices, and so they're undergoing the same propaganda that white people are undergoing.
I want to know like what goes on behind closed doors. Like what did they tell y'all about us for y'all to dislike us so bad?
Hello. I'm not sure. I don't think that I'm the target audience that you're trying to get attention from to answer these questions, but I do offer somewhat of an interesting perspective. I'm biracial, so my mom is Korean and my dad is black. I was raised primarily by my mother, and if you're wondering what's being said behind closed doors, it's a lot. It's a lot. First of all, because TikTok is a scary place. But I want to answer this question so badly. Let me just preface, like, my mom is definitely an ally. There's a lot of things that she doesn't understand, and I always explain to her that she'll never understand, but she's 100% empathetic. And I've put in the effort to educate her about the history of African Americans in this country. She always encouraged me to embrace both cultures. And because of that, I was blessed with someone who allowed me to have a lot of opportunities to educate myself. So now the tea. What is being said behind closed doors? A lot of Asian American families immigrated here, right? And so before they touched American soil, they've never had contact with black people. That's not something that was a common occurrence in places like China and Korea and stuff like that, and still isn't to this day. So when they hit soil here, the white tea people are the ones who give them the information on what it's like to have relationships with African American people in this country, right? So they say things like they steal, be careful, they're dangerous, they could harm you, they're criminals, they make all these babies and stuff like that and don't take care of them. All the negative stereotypes that you see on television basically is what is broadcasted out to them, and they pass this idealism along from one family member to the next family member. So you can say that some of the negativity is driven by fear. All right, the second half of the tea is there is a lack of education in Asian culture, in the education system. Slavery, the civil rights movement, Jim Crow, all these different things that happened in this country that had a big impact on us isn't really explained thoroughly enough. And you know what? In American culture, it isn't explained thoroughly enough either, in my opinion, but that's another conversation for another day. It's glossed over very, very lightly. So the lack of knowledge means that there's a lack of understanding and empathy. And then a lot of Asian families are sold the American dream. If we come to this country and we work hard for everything, then we'll be successful, just like I don't want to, just like them, just like the YT people. And so when they see things like affirmative action and different things like that, in their minds, they feel like, oh, Black people in this country get a pass or a special privilege, and yet they're still not getting ahead. So they must be lazy, etc. And we all know these things are not true, that it's way more deeper and complex than that. But there's no knowledge being passed down that gives them the insight that they need to understand it. And I'm not making excuses. I don't want you to think I am, because being a racist or being bigoted or trying to hold other people back, it's not okay, right? It just isn't. You shouldn't just take someone's word for something. Like, have your own mind, think for yourself, go out there and seek the knowledge, just like I did, just like my mom did, just like her friends did, so I'm not making excuses, but I am trying to give a perspective to you in the hopes that you get an answer to your question. So yeah, that's what happens behind closed doors. It's a lot of fear, it's a lot of ignorance, which is the two ugly demons that motivate things like racism and, classism and violence and all those other things that we don't like to talk about in this country, that definitely occurred, definitely have an impact, and is a part of American history. But it's like this elephant in the room that not we, but that some people in this country don't want to talk about because they're afraid or
How do we do this because TikTok was being dumb. But it shouldn't be as long. I think I did like 9 minutes earlier, and it was a lot of rambling, so I'll try to keep it brief. Okay, first, I do have family that works in nail salons. We have some family that owns nail salons. I think they get a lot of their racism from white people. There's definitely Black people in Asia, so I'm not really sure where it's from, but I'm pretty sure it's from white people. But I know my aunt would complain about how, I guess, there had been some Black people that had gone to her nail salon and asked to get their nails redone, claiming that they had gotten them done at her nail salon. So usually, some places do a touch up or something if your nails get fucked up or something. So my aunt was annoyed about some people having done that, but she had a racist take on it instead of just being like, dude, you have no proof that you were here kind of thing, and I'm not doing your nails for free kind of thing. Definitely better. It's how people are more okay with queer people, but they're not okay with anyone in relation to them being queer, that kind of thing. I know when I had dated people of African descent, I think my grandma had said some racist comments, basically implying that there's something wrong with me for dating African American people. Yeah, I had friends, Asian white friends that were like, oh, why are you dating this person? Because they were average looks wise, but not they were African American, so they were not meeting the white beauty standard. And so I was sort of my dude, I feel like you're perpetuating white beauty standards, but whatever. Okay, what else? I'm trying to be sassy. Oh yeah, family trauma. Obviously, you get the stereotypes of your parents wanting you to be financially stable, get into high-paying jobs, doctors, lawyers, stuff like that. And so, they're like, oh, you gotta go to, an Ivy League, go to Harvard, Stanford, whatever. And so, in the past, I was sort of iffy on affirmative action. I was like, my dude, I just want to go to Harvard or something. But obviously now I understand, the nuances and, who actually benefits the most from affirmative action. But, yeah, you get pushed so much by your parents that, oh, you have to go to an Ivy League, push for academics, stuff like that. And so, some people end up blaming affirmative action because they don't really understand all of it. And then their parents also blame it. So, it's a circle jerk of them just blaming Black people for what white people are doing, I guess. or what white people are benefiting more from. And then there's also, what was I gonna fucking say? What was I gonna say? Oh yeah, there's like, a side note for, affirmative action. I guess to some Asian people, and I know to me when I was younger, it seemed that there was like tiers of Asian acceptance within affirmative action. Like it seemed that like, certain Asian groups, got in easier than other Asian groups. Obviously, it's all based on like stereotypes and stuff like that, but definitely to me it seemed unfair. I'm Chinese Vietnamese, by the way, so that probably provides some context. And so like, you know, like people around me are like, oh, what the fuck, like why am I not getting into these schools? There's a lot of like, I guess like privilege takes on it, a lot of elitism, a lot of entitlement, and so like some Asian people end up being very like on the wrong side about it, and they just don't understand it. I mean, I guess some people do, and there's still some, but I don't know, like I don't think a lot of them understand a lot of the context of it. And let's see what else. Another thing I didn't mention in the video I tried to make previously, definitely I'd say like policing in some schools doesn't really help, because like obviously, you know, we've seen statistics about how like some African descended kids end up getting more like harsher punishments, or like, you know, like some of these teachers are really keeping an eye on them. And so I think that also plays into the minority kind of thing, where Asian people are like, oh, you know, like I want to be white, and I want the privileges of being white, even though we'll never be white. It's just not that clear. We'll never be white. Let's see what else. Oh yeah, and then like definitely would prefer like hella like 100% prefer them to like date a white person and not like a black person. There's a lot of colorism and stuff like that too. Asian American people, I think you guys have probably seen how they really they champion colorism. They really do. What else? Maybe oh yeah, I also wanted to mention cosplay culture. Like I know there's a lot of, even though like most of the characters are primarily Japanese and, you know, they're all like pale looking, there's definitely like obviously like black anime characters that were represented very like stereotypically, but there's also like the community itself where there's definitely like weirdos who are okay with white people cosplaying, you know, Japanese characters, but they don't want black people doing that. Obviously a lot of racism and colorism within that. And yeah, I'd say it'd be stuff like that. Like they don't, you know, they're co-opting a lot of white people stuff. They just want to be white. Oh, I guess another thing, I don't know if I mentioned this, I just mentioned it again, I guess. But like a lot of like the media that our parents consumed, I would say, depicted black people in not a very good light. Like I know like a lot of Asian friend groups, back to this trend that's going on, a lot of them will say a lot of slurs, make a lot of racist jokes, that kind of thing, and they think that's okay. And then there's not a lot of people that call them out on it. And obviously when you do, you're sort of like black sheeped. Let's see, what else? Oh yeah, like the gaming Asians, that's such a red flag, but gaming Asians you gotta be very careful. Gaming tech bro Asians, you gotta be very careful. What else? Oh yeah, I was also gonna side note, yeah, a lot of, don't, be very suspicious of Asian friend groups that don't have any black friends. Be very suspicious of them. If they don't have any black friends, that's a sign. Don't talk to them. They might be Republican. They might be internally white, I guess. They've really followed American white culture. What else? Oh yeah, and then Black on Asian crime being perpetuated during COVID. Obviously, we're still in COVID, but like during the height of like Stop Asian Hate. Yeah, like there's a lot of like media stuff surrounding like Black on Asian crime. And yeah, I probably repeat some things. I don't want to go back. I'll put captions on. The captions are probably gonna be bad. I say my words a lot. I'll probably go off private for a second, just so people can hear my 2 cents, I guess. Yeah.
So this is all I got from the stitches, and man, this is a whole lot. I mean, there are so many people that stitched to this video. If you want part 2, why not? Let me know so I can bring the part 2, because a lot of people, I mean, I decided to bring Asian and also what other people said about it, so that we all can understand where everything is all coming from. But then it boils down to white supremacist propaganda, which they sold to Asians, right? And some of them actually really do hold on to it so bad that, like, you know, the anti-blackness is just so bad, like so hard. You see some of them even advising their children, I don't want you to hang out with Black people, because they have sold that propaganda to them. And some of them do not even have the mind to relearn, because if they were that smart enough or, like, you know, understood, they would have understood that they've been using them against one another. And they really do know how, like, you know, if peradventure both parties decided to come back and stick together, it is going to work against them. And now look at what it's going on. This is one of the reasons why, like, you know, in Florida, African American history is not being taught, and also Asian American history are not being taught. Like, they are hiding so many things. I mean, they just want to continue with the propaganda they have sold to so many minority groups about Black people, because all of them keep thinking Black people are their problem, man, not knowing they are not even your problem. Like, you know, the problem are the people that started this propaganda of white supremacists and the rest of it. These are the people that need to be fought, not even Black people. So they saw them that this, and because also, you know, you heard what one of the girls said, like, you know, they all look white, but they are not white person. So some of them are agitating that, like, you know, we are white, like, you know, we are like your color. We work hard too, and we should be seen in your own position, or like be closer to you and all that. So some of them really do want this white power so hard, like the Asians. I am not saying it because, but like, this is how, like, you know, what I have found out from all the histories that, like, I have been going through forward and back and all that. They really do want that white supremacy so bad. That's why some of them, when you see them, they act so wide, forgetting where they come from, that they are still the minority. And then let's come back to, like, you know, like Michelle, the first woman that spoke. I mean, I love the fact that she was able to expose her own family, what they did to her and all that. But it's just really crazy how people, like, you know, just because of one skin color, or like, you know, because somebody is Black and the stereotype, this thing that you have heard and all that, some of them never even had any encounter with Black people. But just because they have told them, like I keep saying, the media is part of the people that shit, like, their propaganda on Black people is just so bad. That was why they sold those lies. They sold to Black people, like especially Africans, about African Americans, and they also sold lies to African Americans about Africans. So this is the propaganda that people are also supposed to use there. As thank God that, like, you know, as we keep growing, the internet is becoming, like, you know, there are so many things you can search on the internet, like see how things all started, because most of the histories are well documented and all that. You can easily read up. So we are reading up, we are making research, we are finding out who is lying and the rest of it. Then coming to why most Asians dislike Black people, I don't see, like, that some of them do not even have any reason why they, but some of them just because what the media said, or because what they told them, and the rest of it, they told them Black people are dangerous. Have you ever had any bad encounter with Black people? No. No, but the media already sold that to them. Some of them, it's hard for them to deconstruct Some of them it's hard for them to relearn. So that thing they told they sold to them is what they still have. But then now a lot of things are changing. People are going through TikTok. People are going through so many places, finding out what is going on, understanding, like, you know, they are even using them against themselves. That's why, you know, remember that I have told this in several times, like, as we keep going, why do they have so many Asian stores in black neighborhood and all that? Because they wanted to start all of this in the white neighborhood, but the white people do not want that. They do not want them in their, even white people do not want Asians in their own neighborhood. And they sold, like, you know, they gave them loans, move over to black people. That's why when you come around, you see black dollar do not stay how many minutes or how many hours in black community. It goes to Asian stores, because they were not able, they did not give black people loans. Black people are still asking for loan at this very moment to start a business. They will look for a way to frustrate your life till you decide to give up, because they will not give it to you. But they were able to give it to to Asians, because they are fighting black people and they want them to join the force. So it is you understanding and deconstructing and knowing that you are being used against your own interest. Not until you find out you are fighting for nothing. Not until you understand what all these things are happening. Then join the winning team. Join the team. Let's come together. Like the other guy said, come together and fight what is fighting us, because there is no how they are going to fight only black people and leave you. They eventually will come to you when they finish with black community. This is where I am going to draw the curtain. Thank you so much for the support. See you all in my next video. Bye for now.